everybody, and welcome on this lovely, we're on Thursday, aren't we, morning. Thank you for joining us. We're here today to learn about neurodiversity and learning to drive. We'll do all the proper introductions in the moment. Like a physical classroom environment, I'm going to let us all kind of shuffle into the classroom first and get settled before we start cracking. So we've got a good turnout today. I like the numbers ticking up as fast as this at the start of a webinar. No pressure though, Tony, but get a good turnout. It's obviously an interesting subject.
That's great to see. Thanks, Carly.
Okay, so I think the numbers they shoot up very fast when you first get in because everybody's been waiting. So we'll start rolling with the people that we've got, and if people join later on, we can catch them up. So good morning officially to everybody this morning. I'm Carly Brookfield. I'm Chief Executive of Driving Instructors Association. Some of you will know me or have heard my voice before, seen my face. Some of you won't have a clue who I am. I basically look after most of the strategic operations and direction of DIA, but a lot of my work is developing what we do, the services, the education we offer to ADIs. I work on driver education projects more widely with Department for Transport, DVSA. I work in close relation with other associations and other stakeholders in road safety and driver education to make sure the voice of the driver trainer is heard. So you don't often see me in the day-to-day, but I'll sometimes pop up in a webinar. You may see me on TV and radio spouting off about driver education, and you'll sometimes see me in the magazine as well. But I am not the expert in this subject today. I've got somebody with me today who is much more the expert as well at both driver training and supporting pupils who are neurodiverse. The reason this is such an important subject today is we all know client-centered training is vital in terms of the success of our pupils whilst they're learning with us, but also to help them better be an independent and safer driver when they're fully licensed as well. And also the learning to drive journey is part of their wider education. So things we can do as driver trainers to support them here and build their confidence and competence in learning is always going to be useful in other areas of learning in their lives as well. We're going to kick off in a moment with Tony being introduced properly and talking through his experience. Bit of housekeeping. If you want to ask us questions during the presentation, totally fine. Keep those in the Q&A function. You'll see that either in the bottom toolbar of your screen or the top bar. There's a Q&A thing. Stick your questions in there. We prefer to keep the questions to the end if we can. But if there is a burning question, I'll pick it up and I'll ask Tony and he's happy to be interrupted. You're also welcome to chat away amongst yourselves or make comments and share viewpoints in the chat. It's just that our eye might not be on that box as much as the Q&A was, so we'll pick those ones up at the end as well. So just going back to my little preamble, why do I think this is an important subject to be delivering to driver and rider trainers today? Well, all the things I just said before about supporting learners with neurodiverse needs, helping them in their wider learning, helping them reach their learner goals. However, there is, some very pragmatic things that we can hook this on as well in terms of ADI's progress and development. If you consider the national standards as a justification for, CPD in the industry and want to develop, this particular session will be answering the needs of 6.2, Unit 6.2 of the National Standards for Driver and Rider Trainers, which is all about designing learning programs. And if you look through the objectives of 6.2, it's all about the suitability of the learning program for the specific learner. And that's what neurodiversity training is about. It's about developing that. And 6.5, evaluating and developing your knowledge as a trainer. So we all know ADI qualification is not a perfect beast. Got quite a few gaps in it in terms of what you actually deliver and need to deliver as a trainer day to day. One of the gaps is being able to support a wide spectrum of pupils with a diversity of learning needs. And so what we have to do, until I can bash government up enough to get into ground zero the ADI qualification and make it a much better thing for what we actually have to deliver in driver education, CPD is the way that we fill the gaps, both for PDIs just entering the industry or people who've been doing it for 20 years. So this kind of session is really useful to plug that gap around neurodiversity learning, whether you've been doing it for a long time or a very short time. And although we're only doing a little taster to whet your appetite today, you will walk away with some great knowledge, but the knowledge we hope you walk away with and the desire is I want to learn more about this subject. We've also got courses in this area that hopefully we'll be working with Tony a little bit more as well in the future to develop those further. We were the first driver training association, in fact, driver education body in the sector to introduce neurodiversity training for ADIs, as well as other issues like safeguarding. So we're very proud of what we do in this area, but we certainly don't sit on our laurels, and we know we need to keep learning as well in terms of what we provide. So we're going to be refreshing those courses shortly, refreshing our knowledge as everybody in the world is learning about how to better support people who are neurodiverse, and hopefully delivering some of those new courses to you shortly. But I'm going to get Tony to start speaking now, so I'm going to quit my waffle. Tony, do you mind introducing yourself, because you can do it much better than I can?
Yes, thank you, Carly. That was great intro. Welcome, everybody. Lovely for you to be here with us today. My name's Tony Antoni. I'm an ADI. Been working in the industry for at least a couple of years now, and prior to that, I was working in the NHS extensively in a number of roles, most recently research, governance and management. I've also got some experience working with SEN pupils in higher education, so looking at making the education system more accessible at university level. So all of that experience has kind of led me to this point today to be able to share really some experiences and knowledge that I've accumulated whilst teaching some of our learners from a variety of backgrounds. So with that said, I'm going to move on with the slides. Any questions or comments, please put them into the comments page or Q&A, and then be happy to answer those as we go, or if not, we can save them till the end. So we're looking at why we're here, and that is a question to yourselves. So you might have some comments that you might want to put in, or a response to that. Why are you here today? Is there anything particular that's come up for you that you feel there's a need to find out more about neurodiversity? So please pop that response in the comments. We're going to be moving on to what neurodiversity is in summary. There's lots of information out there, so with a search for yourselves in your own time, you can find out a lot more about specific areas of interest. If you've got a learner that's presented to you with a particular area of need, then you might want to delve into that a bit deeper to assist your understanding in how to work with them. The makeup of neurodiversity, we'll be asking, does society need to change or to accommodate, or does the person need to change? Going to be looking at an interesting quote by someone famous about unknown unknowns, double empathy problem, and there'll be some learner cases, some strategies and some challenges that I experienced myself. And then, if you've got questions to discuss, we can answer those at the end. So why are we here? If there's any comments that have come up of interest, Carly, please share. Be happy to go through with those. But essentially, from my experience, there's been an unmet need that's been identified. I certainly have been contacted by people far and wide looking to access driving lessons and to be able to commence their learning journey. There does seem to be a bit of a challenge with some learners being able to find ADIs in their area. So we're looking really to expand the ADI training, as Carly mentioned earlier. It fits in with our national level objectives, and learners' access to lessons, which is a challenge. It's likely to be UK-wide problem as well, even though I've experienced it locally to my area, in and around London, Hertfordshire. So neurodiversity, this is a symbol that's often used to represent neurodiverse community. But what I'm going to attempt to do is just to show you a 2-3 minute clip from BBC Newsround. If I can get this working, bear with me. There are 3 children, Riley, Mateo and Lucy Lou, that do quite a good job of explaining it from their point of view. So this was taken from what is neurodiversity, how do we celebrate it, and what does neurodivergent mean? Well worth a read, that link, if you can search for that on the BBC News Round.
Hi, News Round. Hi, I'm Riley and I have ADHD. Hi, I am Mateo and I have autism. Hi, I'm Lucille. I've got ADHD and dyslexia. And we're here to talk about Neurodivergent Celebration Week. That was a bit of a mouthful, wasn't it? Neurodiversity is a word used to describe the different thinking styles that affect how people communicate with the world around them. It comes from the word neurological, which means things that affect our brains, and diversity, which means things that are different. It includes people who have conditions like autism, ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, and Tourette. Around 15 to 20% of all the people living in the world are thought to have a neurodifference, and no two people will be affected in the same way. And whereas it can be a good thing to see the world differently, it can also be tricky. What I find difficult is that sometimes I can't deal with my emotions when some things what I don't like happen. I find difficult because I can't stay still and can't, I think a lot. Sometimes I find it difficult when it's more easy, and I find it difficult with different foods. This is our sensory wall. It helps us to calm down and stay calm. This is our spinner, and I love it. Here are some tips for you to make everyone feel included. Number 1, don't tease or make fun of anyone in your class who is different or is finding something difficult. Number 2, be kind, understanding, and encouraging. Number 3, never forget you have the power to make a big difference. There is hope even if your brain tells you there isn't. This is my piece of advice to someone who is neurodivergent. My advice is just being yourself. My advice is to never let anything stop you from chasing your dream. Bye.
So thank you. Let's get that shared again.
Just to reiterate what I've just been saying in the chat, people couldn't see the video then, Tony. Itself, they could only hear the audio. But we'll send the video link around afterwards so people can see the full. I think I still thought it was quite powerful listening to the children, and they often give us better messaging that resonates than us adults do. But I think obviously they saw it in the context of the video as well, but a technical issue sometimes happens with Zoom about playing audio and video back together. So apologies for that, folks, but we will send you the video so you can see that.
Thank you, Carly. Thank you very much. Apologies for that. So really why I was looking to show that to you was really, we're hearing from the children there because they've got some understanding of how they're able to interact with the world, and they're actually going to be our future learners. So at some point, they might be coming through to us as pupils and learners. They've got the advantage in that they've got facilities around them. They've got some accessible technology they can use, but also they've got an understanding. So we've got, as mentioned in the video, there's a number of areas that do overlap. So it's not just one. It's not just autism, it's not just dyslexia, it's not just ADHD. There is some overlap. So you might meet individuals that present with 1, 2, or 3 areas of particular need. So understanding your learner is really quite important, and that's really, if depending on what's known, whether they know that level of knowledge about themselves, then they're happy to share it. Not everyone is happy to share or feels comfortable sharing information like that about themselves. So that really does relate back to the ADI and learner relationship. If they feel comfortable to share that, it may actually help facilitate lessons going forward. So we've got some outline here of, in a way, a couple of different communities where you've got the medical profession that will be quite good at diagnosing and medicalizing and identifying if there's an area that a person is suffering in. And there's also looking at what the differences are. Is the person suffering a disability in that with regards to accessing services and provisions that the world has to offer? So you've got this 85% of UK population are said to be neurotypical, and then 15% of the population are neurodiverse. So when you look at a cross section of, let's say, an average of your 10 of your learners, then you've got that percentage that may present. Maybe you know about it, maybe you don't. Maybe the pupil knows about it, maybe they don't. So it's almost a little bit of detective work to work out how you're going to be able to tailor lessons to an individual's needs. So
Can I just interrupt there, Tony?
Yes, please.
That's the thing. The problem is people aren't going to come into the session and tell you that willingly, are they? Or they're not going to tell you when they're booking lessons. But it's anybody who's heard me speak on the subject before, not neurodiverse in general, I'm a big advocate of doing questionnaires with pupils before they even get in the car and trying to glean as much information as you can. And I don't think it's a rude or intrusive question to ask on whatever pupil profile form you send to pupils, just to get a bit of more information on them before they get into the car, to ask if they have any specific needs that need supporting. They can choose whether they answer that question or not, but the ones that do, it does help better prepare you for that, doesn't it?
It does, because it saves a lot of time. And on occasion, it might be after 1 or 2 lessons, maybe more information comes to light, because the pupil and the learner might become more comfortable with you, because some people may feel particularly nervous meeting someone for the first time, and they don't feel comfortable. It takes a little bit of time for them to feel more comfortable with the ADI, for them to be able to share something which I'll mention now. One of my pupils, actually, only after lesson number 2, they mentioned that they were actually struggling with high anxiety. So certain behavior, for example, getting into the car with me for the first lesson, for me to introduce them to the vehicle, and then within a couple of minutes they excused themselves, said, apologies, I've just got to go and change. So they just wanted to go back into the house and change their clothes, and then they get back in. But that seemed puzzling to me, but it was only the day or two, the lesson or 2 after that shared that they actually do suffer from high anxiety, and that sort of behavior that might seem a little bit unusual to an ADI. There's often a reason behind that. It's just that maybe we don't know what the reason is. So that's just one example that comes to mind. Thank you, Carly. And then if I may move on, and then keep any comments or questions coming, we can put those in at the end. So what is your favorite color? So if I can ask our audience, they might all have a color that comes to mind. That's their favorite for today. Maybe that favorite color might change. It might not be the same all the time. It may be something different next week. So the point of me asking this question is really just to get people thinking that in this case, answering this question, we've got some choice, we've got a preference, we've got some understanding that we might like a particular colour. But whereas if you've got someone who is presenting as neurodiverse, they may not have a choice in how they're interpreting the world and how they're interacting with the world. So it's just getting us thinking along those lines, that we're meeting people with differences. So does society need to change? So this is a question where we might even link this to conversations around people that have got hearing impairment. Is the world set up for someone with a hearing impairment? Is the world set up for someone who needs wheelchair access? Well, all of those provisions were put in place over time. So really, we're playing a little bit of catch up with neurodiversity or people that are neurodivergent, in that we need to be thinking about how can we make our content, our lessons, our delivery, how can we make that more accessible to somebody who may struggle with the standard delivery, whether it's verbal, visual, following instructions, how a lesson would normally unfold. How can we best tailor it to the needs of our learners? There is also potential for some learners to be offered medical care and attention. They might be on a prescription medication, for example, to help them cope with certain challenges. We've also just mentioned about offering adaptations. It's likely that it's a combination of approaches. So with some reflective questions, how does this affect our learners? Are some learners or potential learners being left behind, or because they're struggling to access, or they've had a lesson and they've been put off by the experience? And maybe that takes, because I've met pupils that have been put off from taking lessons, and it's been a number of years before they got back into the car again to feel confident to resume learning to drive. What do we know about our learners? How much are they comfortable to disclose to us? And how can we help them learn to drive? So there's a clue there in that we're asking questions. So just to come back to that, because questions might form part of the solution. So moving on to what are the unknown unknowns. So this has been part of the theme from the beginning, and then relates back to what do we know about our pupils. So this particular quote, if you bear with me, dates back to 2002 as a Pentagon briefing by Donald Rumsfeld. He actually, and I had to reread this several times just to try and make sense of what the gist was here. As we know, there are known knowns. There are things that we know. There are also, we also know that there are known unknowns. So this is to say that there are some things we do not know. Now, that sounds fairly obvious, but we move on to, there are also unknown unknowns. So these are the items of information that we know. We don't know that we don't know. So this is where I have to repeat that to myself. These are the things that we don't even know that we don't know. So we're not aware of what we don't know. So what Donald Rumsfeld was saying was that the category of the unknown unknowns are where the problem areas are going to appear. So how do we address that? And it's really, if I could give you a take-home message from this slide, is that we're starting our journey with new pupils from a point of view of curiosity. So we're looking, we just have to kind of accept that there are some things we're not aware of, we don't know, unless the pupil discloses them to us, and then we're relying on the pupil having a grasp and an understanding of where they're coming from. So we're putting the pieces of a jigsaw puzzle together to try really to deliver a lesson to our pupil and get them through on that journey to the point where they're a safe legal driver and they pass their test. So that's easier said than done, but the take-home message is starting from a point of curiosity. So this slide is really highlighting the fact that you've got, on the left, you've got a person who may be on an autistic spectrum, and then on the right of the slide, you've got someone who's a non-autistic person. Now, the circles, in a way, are areas where they may struggle. Each person may struggle to read between the lines, overcome other people's misconceptions about autism, manage sensory distractions. So on that particular point, I mention it a bit later in one of my case studies, where I had a pupil that was easily distracted by visual cues. So we talked about incorporating that into a commentary part of the driving, and I'll mention more about that later. On the right, you've got someone who may be non-autistic, forms positive, may struggle to form positive first impressions, recognize and understand autism, and imagine the autistic sensory difficulties. So the empathy problem is that both parties may struggle to understand each other's thoughts, feelings, behavior, and differences. So the idea behind this slide is just to be aware of that. And we're only, on this occasion, we're just talking about autism. There may be other factors at play, ADHD, dyslexia, dyscalculia. And we're trying to bridge the gap between our perception and understanding of the world and our learners' understanding and perception of the world, and trying to bring those worlds closer together so we can facilitate progress and effective learning. Any questions on that at all, Carly, from your side? Anything coming up?
Not any questions on that specifically at the moment. I think as we all kind of cogitate as we're looking through the slides, I'm sure we'll all have questions towards. Oh, hang on, one's just popped up. Let me just grab that one now. Okay, so Ron's asking, to keep it simple, what is autism? Is there a simple, easily grabbable, explanation of autism that people find easier to get their heads around, basically, those of us who are non-autistic?
That's a good question, thank you. There isn't a fast and clear answer to that, in that we're still learning about all of this neurodiverse area. But what we have understood, and also the key point there is each individual may experience that in their own unique way. So you may, for example, if you're lucky enough that you've actually received a diagnosis that you've got, you're a person with autism, person A and person B may present in two different ways. They may experience the world in two different ways, because there might be slight differences and nuances for person A and person B in how they present to you at a driving lesson. So as much as we would like to have a clear definition of, or how do we work with people under that umbrella, because they do use the term umbrella. The umbrella kind of covers a lot of the neurodivergent categories. And within that, there's a multitude of different variations of how people present. So, for example, you might have someone that may experience high anxiety. They may struggle with following instructions. They may take instructions literally. So you've got to be really careful with how you deliver instructions and guide them through a lesson. They may get left and right, and this is not just all autistic people, people with autism, it's a number of those categories we talked about. There may be difficulties with their limbs, so left foot, right foot. They may get, and that has an implication with the gas and the brake, for example. And if you're in a manual, the clutch as well. So I'm not sidestepping the question. I'm just trying to express that each pupil will come to you with, and that's if they know. I'll go back to this, because you may get pupil that just are undiagnosed. They present to you, and you think, oh, that's a bit odd. Why did that? Why I did say at the next junction turn left, but they tried to turn right, or something like that. You might get clues, and then it's really just a conversation with your learner to work out how best to meet them and impart the instructions and deliver the lesson in as safe a way as possible, but also to facilitate their progress in learning. I don't know if that's helpful with what I've said.
One of the other points that somebody's raised is that it would be helpful to have a definition of and differentiation between each of the neurodivergencies. So, and I know in itself that can be fraught, because there's A, people are still learning about these issues, and B, it's difficult to just box people like that. But there is characteristics that we can develop profiles for people, and that is in the neurodiversity longer course that we offer. But is there something you can give people now, Tony, in in headline detail?
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is one of the sources which is quite reputable and reliable in a way is if you search with regards to the NHS. So the NHS are often in contact with all of these people, and they'll have a write-up on their website, which we can share as well, Carly. So I can pass that on to you. Given it's really just partly there are different categories, different characteristics for each area, and also given the time we've got today, it might be something that we can elaborate on future sessions where we've got more time, Carly, as well. But certainly some of the certainly my experience, what I've found, I'll be mentioning that a bit later in a couple of the case studies of how I was challenged and what strategies we can potentially put in place as a way of getting 2 or 3 steps closer to meeting the needs of the individual. But it's more complex than I can give you a kind of a high level answer now, if that's possible for me to leave it at that point for now. Is there anything else in the questions as well, Carly, that's coming up? Anything additional?
Not right at the moment, so carry on flowing, and I will interrupt you as rudely as I have been doing to pop in anything I think is more urgent to be answered.
That's great, thank you. So this case, learner case 1, some of the challenges that I experienced was with a person that presented with autism. I knew this was the case as the person came to me. They required clear and concise instructions and information. They had previously sat a practical test that was unsuccessful after approximately 40 hours of lessons. The learner did not disclose that they had suffered previously from anxiety and stress. So that's a key point, because you can only do so much with what you know. So you're relying really on being able to have that relationship with the learner where they can share with you, and that's if they know. All topics were covered with me again over a period of intensive lessons. And in February, Monday 19th, the learner was unsuccessful in passing their practical test. So with me, they were driving, quite well. I thought that they were ready for their test. However, with the examiner in the car, literally less than 10 minutes into the drive on their test day, the learner, the candidate, was challenged down a fairly narrow road, and they met a flatbed articulated lorry, which is going to be challenging for even seasoned drivers to meet on a narrow road. So with that, you've got a combination of this is how I've understood it. You've got someone new in the car, the examiner. You've got quite a challenging situation, which is a narrow road. You're meeting a flatbed truck that had to mount the curb just for clearance. But my candidate actually became, let's say, flustered or anxious, and the end result was that the test was unsuccessful because they struck the curb. They also exited the vehicle in a sort of panic to call their mum. So, and based on that, the test was terminated and was unsuccessful. So that was unfortunate, but I've learned from that, from the point of view of how the pupil drives with you as an ADI, and obviously you've built up a bit of a relationship with them over a number of hours. They might feel comfortable, they might feel safe. However, if there are, so what I would do now goes back to what you said, Carly, about the questionnaire. is finding out, does the pupil suffer from anxiety and stress? If they do, you might want to address that as a topic to as a weakness to spend some more time on. How you do that is debatable, but certainly because you're trying to bring a mock drive as close to the real thing as possible, but inevitably it's not, because you've got that closer relationship with the learner. And if the person does really struggle with meeting new people, then there is a solution for that we're going to come to a bit later, which involves making contact with the test centre, speaking to the examiners there or the manager of the test centre, and explaining. And this all goes back to if we know that this is an issue, because if we don't know it's an issue, then we can't have that conversation. So you would encourage the pupil to meet with the manager or an examiner at the centre and discuss any particular challenges or needs and get some advice and guidance. And in my experience, they're more than happy to help. And then meeting an examiner before the test date might also be a solution to alleviate any stress and anxiety that a pupil might be experiencing in the run up to a test date. So that was a challenge. That's something that I'm hoping I'll be able to improve upon going forward. Any questions on that case at all? Please let us know. If not, we can talk at the end, address that at the end.
I've just had a good suggestion from one of the delegates on the call. There is a tool called the Insights Discovery Personal Profile, which I've done in the past. My background is marketing and comms, wide diversity of careers in financial services who do psychometric profiling of everybody, even if you just walk through the door as an employee, government bodies, all that kind of thing. So it's a very interesting process to go through these, find out a lot about yourself, but also have used them in profiling people I'm working with as well, and clients, all those kind of things. So that one in particular, I think, is a very good tool. So I think we'll try and find a link for that later and drop it into the chat so people can have a look at that. So thanks, David, for that suggestion, because what it kicks out, that particular profiler, is an idea of you and how you like to be communicated to. And there's also profilers around specific learning needs that are used as well. So we're looking at the moment in DIA is how can we bring all of those attractive assets of different profilers into one profiler, including a risk profiler. So you can do one profiler with your pupils before they start learning that kicks out quite a lot of information to you and crunches that data for you, so you don't have to go through lots and lots of forms, and give you a much better idea of somebody before they get in the car for the first time.
That's great. Thank you. And thank you, David, for that suggestion for insight. So learner case 2, more challenges. This learner disclosed that they were a person with ADHD, but was controlled with medication. However, they did express to me they had an overactive mind if they did not get their medication. And on at least one occasion, there was an issue with that, in that they didn't have it, wasn't available due to shortages nationwide. So in this regard, there's quite a reliance, really, if the learner has got friends and family to assist them with this and a number of other challenges. If they don't have that, it can be an increased barrier to learning to drive, so possibly interrupting the flow of lessons and the regularity, the continuity of the lessons. Back in February again, this learner successfully passed their practical driving test. So the good news for this is that they passed, even though they did experience sort of sleepless night and they were nervous and anxious on the day. So that was really just a bit of a background to those challenges, in that there's often more going on with your learner that you may not be aware of with regards access to medication and that kind of thing, and support, just family support. Any questions on that? Let us know. If not, I'll move on to case 3.
Yeah, there is a good point here made by Lee. I have some understanding of what DVSA does to accommodate specific learning needs and neurodivergence. But Lee's asking the question, are examiners specifically trained in neurodiversity issues so they're better able? There is some training, it's not where it should be. And given the whole issue and challenge around driving tests, recruitment, new examiners, and all those kind of things, it's not necessarily where it should be in terms of prioritizations, but there is a working group of us stakeholders and the DVSA people responsible for things like development of theory tests, development of practical tests. And in that group, there's also stakeholders from disability charities who meet regularly to discuss what more can be done and developed to better support pupils who are, with a whole spectrum of hidden and visible disabilities as well. But I am right. If it looks like I'm disinterested in the webinar, I'm not. I'm writing lots of notes from your questions of things that might not be completely obvious in training we're doing at the moment, or in our courses, or in the guidance we give, that we can actually develop as a better toolkit on this issue. And where we haven't necessarily got all the full answers, like from DVSA, I can go and harangue them today and say, give me your latest update of what accommodations are being made, and also what's happening with your examiners in terms of their knowledge and understanding. So sorry about that, Tony. I just thought that was quite an important one to pick up on.
That's great. That's really good. Thank you. And thanks for that comment. So linking in with that about the training, you're not going to do any harm by contacting, or certainly encouraging the candidate to contact the test centre, because there's going to be a great deal of knowledge and experience within that. So once the examiners within that test centre have a discussion, they might say, right, we've got this pupil, this candidate who's coming in on the 1st of the month. And then within that group, there may be someone with particular experience or training that may then be able to put themselves forward to meet the pupil before the test, or even be their examiner on the test. So going back to our slide on empathy, if you've got someone with that additional experience and training, that bridges the gap and helps with the understanding of how to work with the candidate on the day. It's not that, I don't imagine that they're getting any special treatment. It's really down to interacting with the world, communication with the person, and really trying to meet their needs on that level. So I'm going to move on. Thank you for that. Learner case 3, this is where some strategies start being pulled out. This particular case, the learner is a person with autism, expressed that they feel like their feet are really far away from their head, and that the signal is low. So this is in their own words. It felt like a distance, a real long distance between their feet and their head. So it was implying that they needed a boost in connectivity to help them respond in the right way, in the right time, correct use. For example, positioning the right foot over the correct pedal, confusing the use of the brake and accelerator. So that's how it unfolded. That was the result of that kind of feeling that they experienced. This learner may take instructions literally. So instead of the ADI saying, follow the road ahead, the instruction was adapted to, if it's safe to do so, at the roundabout, please follow the road ahead, second exit. So without that additional clarification, follow the road ahead, which you could say to someone and they understand that it means at the roundabout, ahead means the second exit. This particular candidate may just not slow down and stop and follow the rules of the roundabout. They may just literally go straight ahead, which is obviously all of the dangers involved in that. So the way that we deliver the instructions is where it is really important in this sort of case. So appropriately timed, clear, concise, specific instructions were helpful. And this is how we started working together with this particular learner to make sure that they understood what the ADI was needing, was requesting. Any comments or feedback or questions based on this case 3?
And just flicking to them. If a pupil refuses to take medication for ADHD, but still wants to learn to drive, what do you tell them? Or if there's any viewpoint from you as a trainer that they need more support than you're able to give them in the driver training context, medical intervention or otherwise, you know, how do you tackle that kind of situation?
Yeah, so we can as ADIs we can only deal with what we know and what presents on the day. So we're certainly speaking for myself. If I feel the learner can actually drive safely and legally, and I'll only be increasing challenges with agreement with the learner so that we're building that confidence and consistency. But if there's any red flags that are coming up consistently, then because we're not really able to, certainly I wouldn't be able to comment on any of the medical side of things, but if the person is under medical care, certainly in the case that I mentioned about the medication, they disclosed to me that they weren't able to access the medication that they needed, but it was available at a pharmacy. So locally they couldn't access it, but they phoned around and it was accessible, but at some considerable distance. And in that scenario, I agreed to, okay, we're still going to have the lesson, but we're going to get you over to the pharmacy. So I was able to assist in that way. However, really, that's a discussion between them and their medical team. And if it's like when you do the head check questions, if the learner isn't feeling well, or if they're not able to concentrate in the way that you would like for a lesson, that you don't feel it's safe, then that would be adapted. You could adapt the lesson. You could say that the lesson is going to be cancelled. Certainly what I have done before is people have felt a bit poorly and not able to concentrate, then I can switch the lesson to show me, tell me questions. We can do other elements of the training required, the topics, which doesn't involve a lot of driving where there's a lot of concentration needed. So I hope that's helpful, but certainly anything with regards to refusing medication, then that's something with compliance. So that would be having to be addressed with the medical team. It's not something you could actually just communicate that I don't think it's a good idea for us to go out today, because if you're seeing that your pupil is not able to concentrate, or there's some danger that doesn't seem to be resolved by having a break, stretching the legs and then readjusting with the delivery of the challenge or what the topic is, then you may just have to say, we might just have to terminate the lesson, unfortunately. Hopefully not, but normally most people that know they've got to take the medication will comply, because they know how it impacts, and if they're coming to you for lessons, they're normally well motivated, they want to make progress, they want to learn, and they know that that's part of it, the medication. If they're just having a bad day, like anybody could be just having a bad day, then it might just be worth postponing the lesson. Yes, Carly, anything else coming in?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a point on that. If any of your pupils are taking medication that might have contraindications for driving, clearly that is a driving risk for both you, the pupil, and the wider road safety. And it does need to be something that you need to potentially look at disclosure before they start learning to drive with you, because there's some very practical reasons for that, other than the safety reasons. You may find things like insurance is invalidated, including public liability and indemnity, if the insurer, for example, does not think you have made reasonable efforts to manage the risk. And a reasonable effort may have been, did you ask the pupil and undertake any profiling of them before they even got in the car to understand about medical conditions or any medication that may impact their safety whilst they were driving. You could consider putting it into terms and conditions that people do have to disclose this information, because that's a way of making it contractual. I know it's a hard ask, but the harder thing is dealing with an accident that is caused by not asking these questions, and the harm to you, your pupils, and other road users. So sometimes we have to get over that discomfort factor of asking questions, and we have to be quite technical and official about it. And as I said, maybe think about writing it into terms and conditions that pupils do have to disclose certain information to you if you believe that that is a risk to the learning to drive process.
And would that possibly link in, Carly, with the questionnaire that you mentioned earlier as well, where when you first meet, would that be something as part of that when you're looking to
and linking back to the Insights Discovery Profiler, People are asking for the link. The problem is a lot of these psychometric tests are commercial. They are bought by license or volume licenses by employers and organizations, and they deliver those to their employee bases. So people who've already had them probably had it paid for by their employer rather than the free version. There are free versions floating around. They may not be Insight, which is the brand that delivers that profiler, because they like to charge for what they're doing, or at least offer a free trial, which leads to you paying. So it's quite difficult to get hold of these individual profilers that are from the credible organizations. You'll see some that are offered for free, but they're often not as credible and tested, or they're to draw you in on what we call a freemium basis for you then to have a paywall and commitment at some of the point. So what I'm looking to do as a volume buyer of products, based on the size of our membership, is to be able to negotiate access to some of these products. There'll still be a fee, and it depends on the negotiation whether I can subsume that fee for my members or I have to pass it on. But we're hoping to be able to combine various different profilers. For example, the driver metrics risk profiler that has been absolutely attuned to novice driver need, and some other profiles into one, and try and make it a packaged service and make it accessible so you can use it with all of your pupils rather than it being a product that you can only use with a handful because it's quite expensive to do. So we're just exploring that world now. The really good products, though, are charged for, and there will be a price to them. The less good ones, they are free, but they're not as useful. So it's just that whole issue and challenge of finding something that you guys can use and is not going to be too costly, but is effective as well. And it's also an easy tool to use. You can get something free, but it's rubbish and it doesn't do its job, and it's really time consuming to use. Or you could get something that's quite good and you might have to pay a few pounds a month to use it, but there's a great outcome. You've got much more information before you go into lessons with pupils that's going to help you develop their learning program, and also help you mitigate some of the risks of that pupil, which can be extremely expensive if you don't know going into the process. And so those are all the things that we're looking at the moment that we can hopefully do for members in the future.
Thank you, Carly. That's great. So I'm going to move on to case 4. More strategies unfolding here. So this learner with autism and ADHD expressed the need to say, and I mentioned this earlier, this was my case from earlier, where they feel the need to say what they've seen, because otherwise they just get really preoccupied and distracted and overwhelmed by the thoughts of the observation. So they might be driving along, they might see a cat or a dog or something that catches their attention, and their coping strategy is they just say it out loud. And that, in a sense, for me, it started thinking, right, okay, so what can we do? We could feed this into the commentary topic of what can I see, what can I do, and then just encouraged the candidate, the pupil, just to express, not to hold it in, not to feel like they're going to be saying anything wrong. They can still say that if that's going to help them learn and drive safely during the lesson. That was encouraged. So it was using the commentary for that. So that strategy worked out quite well. The pupil was able to make progress. Any questions on this particular, and this strategy came out from an unknown. So I didn't know that this was the case until we actually got into the lesson, and the pupil was quite happy to disclose to me that that's what they are more comfortable doing.
I've got a question out of interest. From my experience, of people in my own family who have autistic traits, for want of a better and gentler word than I just used, so apologies for that, but they clearly are some, and they have had some as an adult, because adult diagnosis is much more fraught than children's access to. So we're starting to see a trend of a lot more adults being able to access kind of analysis and diagnosis to finally find some answers about how they've related to the world all this time. But it's much easier to get children into those diagnoses than it is adults. So a lot of adults are, you might, in the 25 plus range of pupils, you might find people are completely unaware that they've got issues. But one of the traits is a lack of empathy, isn't it? And that's not common to everybody with autism, but a lack of empathy can be a problem. And in an environment where we're always trying to tell people, you know, think about other road users, think about other people's safety, and we try and use that as a road safety education method. It's not necessarily going to, it's hard as it is to get 17-year-olds to think about other people themselves. But do you find sometimes when you're working with people with autism that they sometimes lack the empathy to be able to think through the impacts of their behavior on other people?
Yeah, it can be a challenge, and that's where one of the ways that we deal with it is, certainly I deal with it where I'm only increasing. I'm starting off, let's say, in a quiet road they've never driven before, and I'm increasing the challenges, and I'm encouraging the learner to look out for the hazards. So that's our hazard perception, and with repetition, it normally gets better. But one of the things that comes up, Carly, is that the time that it might take, let's say we mentioned neurotypical at the beginning of the session, the average time it might take someone that's neurotypical to get to a point of being confident and consistent with the topic, for someone who's on the neurodiverse characteristic spectrum, might take them twice, 3 times as long, 4 times as long. You might, as an ADI, you might have to be super patient and find creative ways, working with the learner to find out how to bridge that gap, how to get to that point of competency, consistency, and independence without overwhelming the learner because of the pace at which you might be used to going. So as an ADI who is learning about this, I'm talking about myself, I'm learning more about neurodiversity. I'm now more aware of how long it may take people. There isn't like a standard, oh, normally in 2 lessons we would have covered crossroads. It may take somebody a lot longer because of the sensory input that they're experiencing at a crossroads that can be daunting for someone at the best of times. So in that sense, as an ADI, I'm having to tailor my own expectations of what the outcome is likely to be, how long it would take that particular learner to progress. So it's working with myself, working with the learner, managing expectations, because some people are really keen, well motivated, and the learner themselves may feel like, oh, why haven't I mastered that already? And then you have to unpick the reasons why, maybe go back over some areas of weakness that you need to focus in on. So it becomes really interesting from an ADI point of view if you engage with that. And if, for me, my point of view is I find it really interesting. So maybe I should have said why I'm doing this, but I find it really interesting because it's challenging to me, and also I'm learning all the time. And I find that no lesson, no pupil is the same. So I'm able to keep things super interesting for me. I'm learning, and also I'm able to facilitate that journey for the learner, where at the end, the joy and happiness that they experience once they pass. Again, easier said than done, but the journey, so it's the journey that's important, not the destination, if you like. So the steps that we take to get to that point are really important, especially for someone that's finding things really challenging interacting with the world for a number of reasons. As we've said, there's almost, well, if you look at the symbol, the symbol that they're using is the infinity symbol. It's that figure of 8 symbol, and it's almost implying that there's an infinite variation in what you've got, what you're working with as a pupil. It's not just one size, and we've only got to look at each other's faces to work out that if everyone agrees with a hand up that we're all different. So we're different on the outside, so why wouldn't we be different on the inside as well? The implication is from a biodiversity point of view, and that's a science term, biodiversity. We're different on the outside down to our fingerprints, our facial expression, our eye color, our hair color. Why wouldn't we be different neurologically? Why wouldn't our brains be different? Why wouldn't parts of the brain develop differently in childhood
I think that's a challenge, isn't it? And sometimes where our own frustrations come from as instructors or whatever we're doing, particularly as adults, is why doesn't somebody else think like me? And if we start from the point of view of, well, not everybody is going to, and sometimes we find that as employers, you know, you get bosses who, why doesn't that person do that task like I want them to do it? And it's like, well, if they can deliver it and still deliver the target, but in a different way to you, that's what they need to do to deliver that best result. And they're more motivated being able to deliver it their way rather than your way. But it can be incredibly frustrating. It's like, what are the ways that I need to develop my understanding as a trainer so I don't let that frustration boil over and I have better understanding. But the empathy thing is really hard, is, you know, I get it why we shouldn't do something, and why can't somebody else understand why they shouldn't do something? But they just don't necessarily process in the same way. And I'll give you a very brief case study of the empathy thing, and it's not a pupil. I represent you guys if you get into trouble at tribunals and in investigations with DVSA, so the interviews under investigation, under caution. And there are neurodiverse ADIs that I will be representing, and sometimes, sadly, it's their very neurodiversity that has brought them into that situation. So communication skills particularly, and a lack of empathy, have meant that they've got complaints from pupils who think, you know, this guy doesn't care about me and he talks to me in a really abrupt way, or she's, you know, she doesn't seem to understand what I need, and he's very, you know, he's very angry with me that I can't, and that is something they need to get over. But they don't necessarily see that they've done something wrong. They're like, well, I don't care that they've complained. That's their problem. They've got a problem. And it's kind of coaching. It's coaching people to understand something that is meaningful to them. So you can't just keep saying, well, you should care. You've got to find a trigger that makes them care or makes them understand why they should care. So even if it's sometimes a very selfish trigger, like, okay, you don't care about that person, but you care about your business, right? And if you don't work on this and you don't get it right, you're not necessarily going to have and it's bringing a very real risk home that they can understand. You can't just keep banging you should just be nice to people, you should just be lovely, and you're hurting people, not necessarily having the empathy skills to do that, but bring it home with a risk that's meaningful to them. At least you're starting to get the switch for them in terms of their behavior.
Thank you, Carly. That is useful. Yeah. So, and those statistics that we mentioned earlier, the 85% and the 15% UK population, well, we're included in that as ADIs. We're not excluded. We're part of that statistic. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Thank you. So these are some strategies. Apologies for the slide being quite busy, but I'm going to leave it up for a few minutes just for you. I hope we've still got okay on time, Carly. I just wanted to let our attendees just have a glance through some of the strategies. So building a trusted relationship, I mentioned this earlier, where the learner feels comfortable disclosing to you what is going to be useful for the lesson, what's going to be useful for their learning. Effective communication. Often, if you've got someone that's really shy and not really able to pick up the phone to discuss with you, let's say face-to-face or even before the first lesson, you might be in contact with the parents or the carers, the guardians of that pupil, and they may be in a good position to kind of share useful information with you. I've often, now what I've done is I've started to introduce this. So I'm looking at where I've got someone who's possibly highly stressed, suffering from anxiety prior to the first lesson. I will always ask, if it's not them directly, it will be the carer or the parent. Is it possible to have a FaceTime just to meet up, have a conversation with the learner before the first lesson, just as a way of helping to get the first lesson underway more promptly, getting that familiarity in as early as possible. And on a recent example, the parent said to me, "Oh, actually, they're really not very good on the phone." So on this most recent example, I wasn't even able, with the invite, I wasn't even able to make it happen because of the parents' opinion that it wasn't a good idea for the learner to do that. So I just went along with that. So obviously it was an invite. It was declined politely. So now I'm going to be meeting the pupil face to face on the lesson, and I'll be doing my best to build a relationship so that they can then make progress And this particular pupil I'm thinking of has, if you don't mind, I'm going to mention this as a case, is previously been unsuccessful on 7 occasions. So having spoken to the parent, I said, okay, have you had a look at the feedback from the examiners? Because that's going to help piece together a picture of what weaknesses, what needs to be worked on. Because now the pupil was transitioning from a manual to an automatic. So great, let's put that. So they kindly put that together in a table, and I was able to, at a glance, pick out a few hotspots, a few themes with regards making progress, speed, observations. So something that topics we can focus in on to make best use of the time we've got. I also encouraged them to make contact with the examiners at the test centre before the test. They've now scheduled a face-to-face together before the test, and from what I understand, they've been really helpful. The examiners, the manager of the centre has been really helpful with the parent in facilitating all of that. So I'm looking forward to that challenge and getting them ready. Hopefully it's going to be eighth time lucky or 8 times successful for that learning. Any questions, comments, please keep them coming, and I will do our best to get through them in what time we've got left. So this particular question, ADIs can ask learners questions. So this goes back to our unknown unknowns. We can't really hope to plug that gap unless we ask questions. So normally now I'll just sort of say, is there anything you'd like to let me know that may assist me or you with your lessons? And I might sort of ask that fairly early on, and then pupils feel comfortable. When they feel comfortable, they can disclose to me, actually, there is something, I get my left and rights confused, for example. So then I'm going to have to deal with that. How do I deal with that? That's verbal instruction. Do I then have to incorporate a visual cue for left and right? So I'm having to problem solve and work with the pupil. All really leading towards having an accessible, tailor-made lesson that you're working through the topics with your pupil. I use, and I'm sure as others do, are flashcards, toy cards, pictures, maybe sometimes demonstrating a maneuver, drawings, optic pens, anything that I might feel is useful to the learner to facilitate their progress. I'm also encouraging people, when questions come up, rather than me just give them the answer, I'll sort of say, look, I'm encouraging them to do their own bit of learning. It might be that the theory knowledge has got a bit rusty, so I'm encouraging them to go back and have a look at the rules of the roundabout, or road signs, road markings. What do we do at a complex junction where there's a yellow patch box? And often ask them to come back with the answer. We can discuss it at the next lesson. So that's kind of sending the message that they're in control of their own learning. They're taking responsibility for their own progress. I'm also, so that point of with regards to setting their own goals, I'm looking to move at the pace that the learner's comfortable with, so that they don't feel overwhelmed, because I know on occasion I've overstepped the mark with a challenge that did leave the pupil feeling overwhelmed. In my own excitement and wish to see them progress, I gave them too much of a challenge that then set them back a bit, because there was an element of fear. So it's really just speaking with your pupil, setting the challenges in step-by-step fashion, so that you're getting feedback from them as, was that okay? Was that level of challenge okay? Would you like to go for an additional challenge now? Something a bit harder, something a bit more difficult. And often, once you get that two-way communication going, it often facilitates the progress. Adjusting tone of voice, pace, volume. For example, eye contact. Some people may feel really uncomfortable if, when you pull over and stop and discuss, okay, now we're going to be introducing emergency controlled stop. You're talking, but you've got to be aware of the person, how their comfort level is and how much they're able to take on board eye contact, or is it, what's the volume of your voice doing? Is it too high? Is it too low? Do I need to speak a bit clearly? Do I need to repeat that? Maybe asking the learner, is that understood? Is that okay? Do you know what we need to do now? So you're just getting some confirmation that they've understood the instruction. So frequency, this duration of lessons is, I've had a challenge before where, in my keenness to get lessons booked in with a learner, initial first 2-3 lessons were not at the same time, at the same day, every week. It was just a matter of just trying to get them on board, get some introductory lessons going. But I found that they really benefited from having the regularity. So Friday afternoon, 3 till 5. And if it wasn't Friday afternoon, 3 till 5, it really threw them. It really threw them. So particular learners might really benefit from that regularity and consistency. Otherwise, it can really throw them off and set them back. It's, for us, let's say neurotypical, you might just brush, oh, that's a bit inconvenient, I'm going to reschedule. But for someone that's neurodivergent, might be a massive impact on their weekly routine, their habits, and it may really throw them. So something that doesn't seem so major to an ADI might be quite a major impact on your learner. So it's about feeling the way. And this is where, again, we're coming back to bridging the gap of the empathy, those 2 empathy circles, and bringing us closer so that we're communicating in a more effective way. Regular breaks, and I normally, a lot of the time, the pupil may just decline. They say, oh no, it's okay, I want to carry on. But you can ask the question, would you like a break? That really helps. And then setting the learner some homework. So often it might just be rewatching one of the videos that we're using in their own time, or going over a passage in the highway code, refreshing something about the rules of the road. So that's at the micro level, at the level that we can impact ourselves. Any questions come in, Carly, at all? Anything about those?
Not at the moment, no.
Just stunned silence.
Attentive listening.
That's good. That's good. So, and then we've got some more strategies really relating back to why we're here, raising our own awareness, offering training to ourselves, broadening that understanding, and providing access to the DIA resources, and improving, really the goal is to improve learners' accessibility. So mentioned earlier that I do get contacted. Sometimes I can help, sometimes I can't, just because of the geographical distance to learners. And then obviously you've mentioned this, Carly, you're going up at the higher level, at government level, national level, to try and implement a more nationwide guidance and policy of how ADIs and others can help with access.
Yeah, but also delivery, because at the moment we deliver driver training as we have to in a very practical manner, and there is stuff we can do within that to improve it, but there's other stuff we could be putting around that which would really help. Talk about giving pupils homework, or stuff they can go home and reflect on and process in their own way, because it might be different learning styles. And I think, Milestones, the project we're doing at the moment, is about, if we wrap e-learning around pupils and other forms of learning, as well as a consistent programming car, does that help all pupils, but also could it help neurodivergent pupils in particular? They've got more learning channels they can tap into, and that will engage them, than just a pure traditional way of delivering it.
That's perfect. Thank you. Yeah. So work to be done, but the fact that we're all here together is a positive, because hopefully there's some takeaways that people are going to be able to move on with and try using. And also any comments, questions, I'm hoping we're going to get to those, because I'm here to learn as well. I'm just going to move on. So this is just sort of summarizing what we've been through. Thanks for sticking with us to the end, for those that made it. And happy to take any questions if there are any comments, feedbacks to help us really improve with going forward. As Carly said, this is hopefully the beginning of more projects, more information available to yourselves.
I'm just going through the Q&A. I haven't got any new ones other than one I missed from Joanne before. This is a new one on me. Will we be covering, excuse my mangled pronunciation, proprioception? Proprioception? That's not, I'm not an expert in this space, but it's something that you might be able to answer, Tony.
Proprioception, yeah, that what we could do on another occasion, but we can certainly dive into that. Proprioception, from my understanding on initial hearing that, it's to do with how we perceive the world, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. But it might be the person asking the question knows more about that. Happy to take any particular case that comes up. What any background to the question from the person?
Well, we can look into it and consider that in our delivery. Yeah,
because that's going to be going into more in depth.
Yes.
And the sort of the neurobiology side of things. And of course, if there is a desire to know more, then great. That would be something that could possibly look at, Carly. And then definitely encourage everyone, if there's any burning questions of what you'd like to see more of, or something new and different, then they can contact the DIA, contact yourself, can't they, Carly? And then
I've got homework for me and you, Tony. So I've been noting down the key questions people have been asking and also some ideas about what we can do to help more, and you know, to improve the gaps in the knowledge, and toolkits and all kind of things. What won't all happen at once. There's loads of things we could be doing, but it's just about prioritizing them. But this is an important area. So we will all work to be able to offer toolkits and more advice in this area. But thank you so much to everybody today, because you thought about things in a different way than we thought about them necessarily, in terms of the training approach and what your needs might be, which again reflects the neurodiversity in our own, in our own little webinar world today. Is there anything else you wanted to add, Tony, before we let these good people go on with their day?
Yeah, definitely. Just linking on with that last question about proprioception, that for any high level information, the NHS is always a good starting point, because they often will put it into sort of plain English. It's accessible, and then from there, if you want to dive in deeper into a topic, then you might find links and a way forward. You can get to a point where you're looking at the latest academic papers that universities are publishing and researchers on a particular topic. So it depends how far you want to go into the topic, and then obviously that's as much time as you want to dedicate to that. But certainly the NHS website's a good starting point for anyone, I reckon.
Yeah, and just into my own research and understanding, the Hidden Disabilities website, hdsunflower.com, they've actually got a section that's for their client base, which is about learning to drive, talking about DVSA accommodations and things like that. That's quite a good blog to have a look at. So I'll try and add that to the webinar. But if you want to look up that website, it's called HD, this is all one word, hdsunflower.com. It's the charity for hidden disabilities. You know, the sunflower lanyard or the label. Tony knows what I'm talking about, but others will have spotted it and wonder what it is. That's quite a good thing. And again, starting to work with organisations like that as well to fill in the knowledge gaps from both sides. They're giving out information on learning to drive, which we sometimes find is inaccurate from non-driver training organisations, however helpful they're trying to be. But we're also giving out information that they're the experts in, that we could do with their help in. So linking up with those kind of organisations would be good for us to test what we're delivering in terms of training, because some of it's very new to us as well. And as you said, NHS is great for clear English, straightforward advice, cutting through to what you really need to know as well. So that's good. Go on, sorry, Tony.
One last thing, I would like to thank all the attendees for sparing the time to join us, because I know everyone's really busy. So for those that made it to the end, much appreciated. Thank you. And look forward to carrying on with spreading more information as needed, really.
Yes, thank you, everybody. Sorry we went on a little bit, but the thing is, I think it's a valuable discussion, and all your questions were very valuable, and your own experiences, which I've been jotting down as well. This webinar is recorded. It normally takes us around 24 to 48 hours. One, because Zoom, which we record on, that takes a while to process the video and send it to us as a complete thing. Then we edit it as well in terms of little bits of sound editing and things like that to make it clearer. So 48 hours is the maximum. I hope to get it on the website, so you can catch up on that, and lots of other free webinars that we've done historically that might be useful to you. They're all in diaacademy.co.uk under the webinars tab. So this will shortly be there, but you can also enjoy other CPD webinars that we've done in this area. And thanks so much again. Lots of food for thought for us in terms of developing our neurodiversity training. And keep talking to us about this issue. Any questions at all, any challenges, I just want to run that through somebody else to get their view on it. That's what the ADI help desk is for. And I'm sure if the people on our help desk haven't got the answers, they're very happy to link in with Tony as more of an expert to get you some expert help as well as that. So don't hesitate to call or email our help desk if you just want to chat things through. That's why the service is there. Any challenge you're having with a pupil, or you want to think about a different way of tackling the challenge, do give us that call or email, and we'll spend some one-on-one time with you to try and help you through that. But otherwise, thank you. Hopefully you've got sunshine where you are today, and you've got a great book of pupils to go forward, and you're not having too many problems with driving tests, more than the usual at this moment in time. So I wish you a very good day, and speak to you soon, hopefully on this issue, and being able to provide some more tools for you on this, and anything else we can do to help you as you go about your extremely valuable and crucial job. So thank you all for that. Thank you, Tony. Really appreciate your time today and doing the presentation. It was really good.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Bye.